background noise, and so I've muted all of you. So that means when you want to ask a question, I'd love it if you would do that in the chat screen, please. And I'll unmute you, and then you can ask your question, or if it's a simple question, then I can just answer it right from the chat screen. That way you guys don't have to worry about your own background noise, and we'll have a good, clean, it'll be easy for everyone to listen. So let's talk a little bit about Opener. I am Sherry Stanton. I'm the Director of Education Services. I also happen to be the instructor for Opener, and I just finished writing a bunch of documentation for Opener, so I'm pretty sure that I can probably answer a question about Opener that comes up. Anything that you'd like to ask, please do it via chat. You can also raise your hand because I'll be watching for raised hands as well. We're going to give you information about Opener. We invite you to ask questions about anything you like, and we will try and answer them for you on the call. If we can't answer them for you on the call, we will find the answers for you and email you the answer, and we'll make sure that we cover it in the next Ask the Expert session as well. If at any time you have a question, like you start messing around with some of this stuff after having seen this, and you have a question about how something works, we welcome your questions at any time, and we'll answer them in future Ask the Experts. You can get to us at training@franconnect.com. All right, so let's talk a little bit about checklists. Let's go back out. There we go. Okay, so we're looking at a checklist. In this particular case that has been set up, you sure will get a copy of this presentation, although mostly it's demo. But you absolutely will get a copy of this. We'll also give you the Opener Quick Start Guide, and that has a number of the setup things in it. So when we talk about dependencies and that sort of stuff, that'll be in there as well. All right, so for some of you, you're probably coming from versions of FranConnect that only had dependencies on the opening date. You had to plan everything back from the opening date as they were planning for a party or a wedding. Now, of course, in Orion and future versions, you can do dependencies based on many other things, and we're going to show you a bunch of those dependencies today. You can make things dependent on other tasks. So that makes it a little bit more like other tools you might have been using, like Microsoft Project and that sort of thing. When one task ends, begin the next task, or wait a week and begin the next task, or something like that. And we have that same thing here in FranConnect. There are two different ways that you can set those things up to occur. One of them is, as you see in the top demonstration checklist here, I've got my task number 1 that starts based on a particular milestone, and because I set that milestone up, I already know the date of that, and that's pending. Because these other ones depend on the completion of that first one, we don't know when they're going to start because we haven't finished this. So we don't know when they're going to start. So I have tasks 2 and 3 here, and they are dependent on the completion of the previous task. And what that means is they're going to show up as unscheduled in your list. So sometimes what you'd like to do is you'd like to have it all planned out. You know more or less when things are going to happen. You can also set things to depend on a previous task, but rather than depending on when it actually got done, we're going to chain those things together by schedule date. So this one's going to start a week after the scheduled end date of its previous thing. So these two are set up in 2 different ways. This one is set up to be dependent on the actual completion dates, and this one is set up to be dependent on the scheduled completion date. So if I use actual completion date and I come in here and I mark this guy complete, I say, yeah, I'm done. So now this guy becomes complete, and this guy, he is set to be to start a week after the completion date. So now I know the completion date of this guy. The stuff downstream, still we don't know when it's going to start because it's all dependent on this guy to be finished. So if I'm doing actual completion date, these guys will always be out in the ozone. They'll be unscheduled. For a number of folks that I've spoken to, they actually like that way of doing it because they have very long checklists, And nobody wants to wade through 200 items. They only want to see the things that are just coming up now. So if I don't want to see my unscheduled items, I can simply filter them out. So I can say, you know what, for status, just give me the stuff that's in progress or the stuff that's overdue. That's the stuff I have to work on. I don't want to see all this other unscheduled stuff and stuff that might be pending later. I just want to see those guys. And so I can save those guys, and all of my stuff that's not in progress will go away. So we'll go ahead and get everybody back. And here they all back are. So that's setting things based on the actual completion date. I can also set things based on the scheduled end date, and that means when I click this guy and say he's complete in situation, the difference is this doesn't change. Even though this guy gets scheduled early, he doesn't quite change because this is all about the schedule. So my schedule doesn't change. I can see a lot of things coming out, but they're not going to change. Why do dependent tasks require a start and stop schedule date? So I'm going to open that up, Ryan, and ask you to elaborate on that just a little bit. Can tasks be assigned to more than one person? You bet they can. I'll demonstrate that in just a second. Ryan, what do you mean about dependent tasks requiring a start and stop date?
Hey, thanks for taking my question. So, and I might just be like, you know, seeing this from a different perspective, and it just requires some recalibrating of that. But if something is dependent on something prior to it, let's say it's like a one-off thing that it's, you know, it isn't necessarily date specific, but it's just dependent on the previous task, why does it require that you still put a start and stop date for completion, or for start and completion rather?
Got it. So let's see if I understand this correctly. What I'm going to do in here is choose to add another task so that we can actually talk about what the task looks like. So these guys get dates because we know the previous date of this guy. This date isn't actually hard coded onto the task. So the task looks like this. You guys are used to this, right? Here's my task. And what I really need to know about the task isn't the date of the task, although I can do that. If I know this thing has to happen April 15th, I can totally do that. I can just say calendar and put the date in.
Yeah, but if it's
not, as
not,
you point out, we don't know the date, right?
Right.
All we care about is that it happens a day after the previous thing lets off. We don't actually ask for a date. What we want to know is, when does this start? Let's say it's dependent on another, let's say it's dependent on a milestone happening. So it's dependent on site selection. Once I put the site selection date in, then I can start the next thing. We don't need an actual date. What we would like to know is, how soon after that does it start? Does it start the very next day? Okay, I'm going to put 1 day in there so that I know that site selection is 1 day after that. If I don't know the date for site selection yet, this won't have a date associated with it. This won't have a date associated until I know one. And then I can say this takes 3 days, so it's going to end 4 days after this milestone. Did I answer the question you asked, or would you like to try and rephrase it? Good deal. You got it. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so the other question that we had was, can tasks be assigned to more than one person? And the answer is, you bet they can. So when you're putting in a task, you're going to select an area of responsibility. Mostly that's for reporting purposes. This is something the accounting team needs to do. And who are those people that need to do it? Well, okay, I need my construction manager, or in this case, my accounting team manager, right, to do that. But I also want the franchise user. The two of them have to talk to each other. So these guys are all my corporate users. I have a lot of corporate users because this is a training thing. But then I also have my franchise user, whoever is assigned at the franchise level in my store info, also needs to be in there. So these are checkboxes, and I can fill out however many of them there are. Maybe I also need the training manager. So you can see these guys are populating in here multiple contacts. What that means is that all of these guys will get all of the reminders. They'll also be able to see these tasks when they go in to look at their things to do. So I can assign as many people as I need to. What about having multiple franchise users for one franchise location? Good question. I don't think that you can assign multiple people to this name. However, you can have all of the positions. So I have a lot of these positions in here, construction manager, equipment manager, sales manager, and so on. So I can have as many of these positions as I need. And then when I put a new store in, what happens is it gives me the opportunity to say, okay, here's my store and all the information I know about my store. And it'll ask me who those people are, who's fulfilling those positions at each franchise. So I absolutely could do that if I needed multiple franchise people, because then when I put the new franchise in, I would put that person's name in there. Does that answer your question, Malvina? Hopefully I didn't just slaughter your name. Okay, so I have a bunch of different ways that I can look at this checklist. So in this particular case, it wants to present the tasks to me chronologically because it wants to show me what's coming up next, essentially. And that doesn't always make them line up the way that I'd like them to. You can see my tasks got a little scrambled in here. So it's telling me, here's week 1 of my project, here's week 5 of my project, here's everything that's not scheduled because I can't put it in a week. And then I've got these guys week 5, 6, and 7 of the project and so on for my different checklists. And the reason these guys are broken up is because they're different checklists. So I can choose to have this display as either the weeks of my project, here's week 1, week 2, week 3 going forward. I could also have this display as a countdown of weeks till opening date. So some of you see that in your display. You see 3 weeks prior, 2 weeks prior, 1 week prior. If it says something prior, it's counting down to the opening date. Nothing wrong with that. The tasks actually appear in the same order regardless of what the headers look like. It's just how you like to see those headers. So for some of us, we're less concerned about what week it's happening on, as I'd like to see who it's happening by, or I'd like to group them in some other way. So what I'd like to do is assign these tasks out in some other way so that I can see them. This particular set doesn't have any group names assigned to it, so when I do that, they all pop together as no group without regard to what week they're in, and I can view them a little more easily. I can also choose to group them up by maybe who's responsible for them. So in this case, all accounting team. I don't have to group them up that way. I can group them in phases of the project. So here's the immediate pre-opening party. Here's first parts of construction. Here's training my franchise users, and so on. So I can make the groups be anything I want them to be, and I can see them here. I have a different demo set that I'm going to take you guys to show you that a little better. So in this particular case, I have all my stuff in one big checklist. And you can see where timeless tasks in 2 weeks prior and 1 week prior to opening. But what I really want to see is who's responsible for what. So I'd like to see these are all my financial things. And these are all my things related to the hiring and training phase. They may not be owned by the same group, right? So I'm not just breaking them up by group. I'm breaking them up by different phases of the project. So I can use groups for that. Groups are a little different here than they are in the other modules because I can use them for anything I want, and they don't have to just be one hierarchy. So I actually have 2 different hierarchies of groups in here. I have one for my regular task checklist, and I have one for my equipment checklist. So I break up my equipment checklist by the vendor, because when I'm looking at something across a number of different locations that are opening up, what I really want is tell me all of the things that I have to call H&M Wagner about. I have to order stuff for these 4 stores. I would like them all grouped together so I can make one phone call to that supplier, get all the stuff set up for that, and get it taken care of. So I can set groups up to be anything I want them to be. If, let's say, I'm in here for this particular location because I'm in here looking for store 100. And for store 100, this is not the order I want these things to be in. I want them to be in a different order. So I have this opportunity here to order my checklist for this store to be however I want them to be. So they don't have to fall chronologically, they don't have to fall alphabetically. Some folks like to, you saw in my previous thing where I had them labeled 01, 02, 03, and then I could just click the task name and they would sort themselves alphabetically. So then I could do that. But if I don't want to do that, like I don't want to go to the trouble of numbering these guys, I can choose to just order these checklists. And it will give me, okay, here's the checklist for this store. Here's the order it falls in. I can move these things around. So contact utility companies, I'm going to say I want to do that first. So I can just move that around. I can order these guys any way I want and save this. Okay, and then when I leave here, contact utility companies comes first, even though it's not one of the unscheduled things or it doesn't fall correctly in here. So I have the opportunity to rearrange how my checklists get displayed. So I have a couple different things I can do. I can choose to put groups in, and that will give me my big chunks. And then I can choose to order them inside of here by doing order checklist. Can I change the order even with dependencies? You bet. So it doesn't care what the dependencies are for display purposes. So it's not trying to display them by dependency at all. You can, in fact, this one's unscheduled and it's coming in front of pending. That's fine because it's doing exactly what we said. The one thing about this is that it's only for this location. If I were to go to another location, and that location would be in the default order, and if I wanted to change that again, I'd need to rearrange it for that person. The idea of this is that we're changing order on an exception basis for this location. Now, since I'm doing stuff just for this location, I might need to add tasks in just for this location. I don't want to mess with my template, but maybe this guy fails an inspection and I need to add a task for him to get re-inspected. I don't need to add that into the checklist. Everybody doesn't have to do it, just he has to do it. So I can just add things right in here. It'll only add them onto his checklist. So I can, now my dependency can be dependent on a particular thing, or it could be a calendar thing. So we talked about that before, like why do tasks need dates? Well, they don't, but you might want them for some of them because this is an added in task and this guy's got to get re-inspected by April 15th. So I could put in, okay, April 14th is the Friday, we'll do that instead. So I may need to get him to, I need to put a calendar date associated with this rather than a floating date because it's got to happen by that time. All right, I'm going to jump back out of here. Now you saw that I can add a whole bunch of tasks in at once. Typically, we put them all into the template in the beginning, and then we don't touch them very much. But sometimes you may have something new happen. You need a new secondary checklist. You have a whole bunch of tasks that you need to do. And so you're going to be putting in a lot of tasks at once. If you come in here to add more tasks, question, will there ever be a view option where you can see a roll-up of store tab info for all locations at once? A roll-up of store info tab. Ryan, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that because there is a place where you can see all the tasks, but that doesn't sound like what you're asking.
Hi, I'm back.
Hi.
Another question.
Mm-hmm.
So we, you know, we're using the store info tab for each location, and it's very convenient. We set up milestone events, and it's great. But there's certain people at our company asking, is there a way where I can see kind of all of this information at once without having to go into each individual location? And I just want more of a overview of what's going on so I can see it, you know, quickly from the perspective of every location instead of it one by one.
So the stuff specifically that's in the store info tab or the task stuff? Because tasks, I think I have good news for you.
Yeah, not tasks, but the store info tab specifically in the opener. We are using
Okay.
milestone events, and you have to go into each individual
I get this.
location to kind of get an update. And I'm wondering if there's ever going to be a possible option where you can decide to see all of the location store info for every location at once. Kind of, we've been using a Google
Right.
spreadsheet to kind of replicate it just so we can get a quick view, which is probably something you hate to hear. But just,
Yeah, I have no rocks to throw in the whole dragging things out to Excel arena. I
yeah,
get you. Yeah, so in other words, you kind of like see a tabular thing that said, here's all my stores, and then here's milestone number 1 and the date they hit it, milestone number 2 and the date they hit it kind of thing.
yeah, I mean, the dashboard right now seems to be very focused on the tasks themselves, which is great. And knowing what tasks are problem tasks, for example, or locations have overdue tasks in a quick hit style way is really, really convenient. I'm wondering if there's a possibility that that might be taken further to allow people who maybe don't use the opener as much, but want a quick one-stop shop where they can kind of see where each location is at. Which milestone events, for example, have been completed. I know it's a lot of information in one place, but just a way for somebody to really quickly go and take a look at all locations kind of in the process at once.
Sure. Most of the modules within FranConnect have the opportunity for you to build custom reports, and Opener is one of the ones that doesn't, unfortunately.
Right.
I will take that with me
Okay.
as something to talk to the dev staff about. I do want to check this one report because it might actually give us a little bit of that info.
Oh, great. Well,
And
let
then
me know if you find out.
I sure will.
Thank you.
So, yeah, unfortunately, not very much here in the standard opening timeline report. It gives you a little more, but not all the stuff that you would want to see. So I'll take that back. Thanks. Okay, so we find ourselves putting in a lot of tasks sometimes. Let me go back to a given store and we'll do that. So if I'm in here and I need to add a bunch of tasks, I can click add more and I can start to add these guys in. But very often what I find myself doing is coming in here, putting this in, and then having to set all of these tabs for every single task I do. Okay, this one is actually the construction team, and this is going to be this guy instead, and this is the dependency that this guy has. And I have to set franchisee access, and I'm constantly hitting save, and then it tells me, oh, you forgot to do one of these little tabs somewhere. If you find yourself putting in a lot of tasks for some reason, and this is either in the admin task list or here, one of the things that you can do to make that easier when you break it down is come back out. This option is available both in just the single store list, and it's also available in the admin tab. You can configure what these values are going to be. So let's say I've got 20 tasks for the accounting team, and then I've got another 15 tasks for the construction team. I can come in here and say, I'm going to enter all my tasks for the accounting team. Let's go ahead and just change that to construction so you can see that it's different. If I know who's going to be responsible, then I can do that. But let's say I don't know who's going to be responsible. I do know that all of these things are only going to be for franchisees to view. So all of the ones I'm going to do right now are those. Maybe I'm ordering everything in a particular group. So I can set all of these values. When I do that, and then I say, okay, I need to add more. When I come back out here and I choose add more, those are the values that are here. It's my construction team, and the franchisees can view only, and it's part of this group. And I can just come in here and shrug right away at these. Here's my task, here's my task, here's my task, here's my task. Make my dependencies. And I didn't have to fill in all of these little tabs in here. So I could fill in the whole group of things, and then save these guys and be done, and then change back out change my default values and enter another batch of them, and then change default values and add another batch of them. So if I have to put in a whole bunch of things in a checklist, I can do that here. Okay, so most of the things that you see me get into have a primary checklist in them. And depending on what you do, whether you have multiple checklists, I guess my first question would be, how many of you have secondary checklists or would consider using secondary checklists? Can you do me a favor and raise your hands if so? Because if nobody here is even remotely interested in it, then I will not go through that chat. Yay, okay, excellent. So there are a couple of different things you can do depending on how you want people to look at those. So let's talk a little bit about the primary checklist. I'm once again going to go out to my other demo environment because it's easier to look at. Let's take Lori. So how it probably looks for you now, if you have a bunch of secondary checklists, is like this. You've got store information, and that's great. You have documents that they've uploaded, and then you have your main task checklist, and that's awesome. But if you can't remember where a task was, whether it was on the main task list or on a number of secondary checklists, then sometimes it's going to be hard to find a task. So if it is that you would like to have everything all in one long string, you can choose to use primary checklists, and this will look a little different. If you like to have tabs like this because different people order equipment and different people get into these checklists, and you like it so that Bob only goes into this checklist anyway, and so he's like his little short thing, he doesn't have to look at other people's stuff. Maybe you like having the tasks across the top because you know where people are going to go for things. I find that hard to navigate myself, and so if I were setting one of these guys up, it's likely that I would set it up more like this. I would say, this person has the same number of checklists, so he's got all of these different checklists going on, 5 different checklists. He's only got one tab up here. And then we can see all of those things in here. So here's my task checklist. And again, I could sort these out by group and they would be easier to see. So here's my task checklist for my financials and my hiring, my marketing. And then here's my equipment checklist and my docs and my picture checklist and my 2 different secondary checklists all in the same thing. So that helps me just search for things in here if I need to. Obviously, if I just want things that are mine, I can just say, set this up as just show me my things. Now, I'm not in here, so it's not going to show me those things. I'll say, let's give me everything that belongs to Amber. So Amber's list is a lot shorter for this store. If I'm Amber and I only ever want to see my stuff, I can now save this view, and then I only have to look at my stuff. So each of your viewers can choose to only save and look at their stuff. I kind of like the one long checklist because if what I'm looking for is something about baking equipment, then I have the opportunity to just sort of search in here and say, okay, where's baking? Oh, okay, here it is. And I can look, I don't have to hunt around in the screens. I can just go look for something in here if I have a very long checklist. What else I want to say in here? Ryan, I wonder if export is Excel. Well, again, there you are in Excel. Never mind. So I have a lot of opportunities for sorting my checklist and then narrowing them down to just the things that I want to see on here. Other questions about opener checklist. Can you move an open store back to opener for resale? Yes, you sure can. So what happens in here, I'm in the store summary and I choose to move something into Info Manager, right? Let's go ahead and we'll move Marianne into Info Manager. And here's an interesting thing. Moving her into Info Manager does not take her out of opener. She actually still remains on all my lists and so on. I can see her in the In Development tab in Info Manager now. So if I come over here and I say In Development, I can see her in my In Development tab. She's not gone from Opener. I can still see her there. I won't actually mask her view until I archive her from Opener. But now I can say, oh, okay, well, here's all my folks who are in development. And if I need to move somebody back to Opener, I can move her here. I need to archive her first in Opener so that we cannot see her anymore. So there's Marianne. You can see where we've moved her to Info Manager. In order to get her out of Opener, I actually have to archive her. Now I can always find her in the archive. I can just unarchive her. But I actually do have the opportunity. Oh, she's not there. Marianne. Oh, she's listed as a franchisee because she's not in development anymore. There's Marianne. She's not in development anymore. I should have the opportunity to move her back to Opener. She's down here. I have to click on her. I'm not sure why I can't move her back to Opener, but in any case, I can definitely unarchive her out of here and then fill in anything else I need. Is there a way to create a target opening date and see it on the store summary list or within the checklist rather than only in the store summary? This would be different than the expected opening date. So yeah, I had one customer who did that, who put it in as another milestone date. So of course you can define milestone dates to be whatever you wanted. They had actually a couple of them. They had like an expected opening date and they had a required to be open by. Like we expect you to open on May 15th, but you absolutely have to open by June 15th. And so how they took care of that was they made a milestone out of it. I'm looking to see where my milestones are here. When I have milestones in this particular thing. All right, I'll go back to my usual one. There we go. So you can make it one of the milestones here, and it'll show up here. I don't know that milestones show up on the checklist per se. So let me open up the thing and have you explain your business case to me, and let's see what we can figure out for you. Allie?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi. Okay. So we added, I think, a milestone into the store info page, which is great. However, we have a weekly call where we go over our progress, and that's when we change the expected opening date based on construction and if things get delayed. And it would be nice to see it either on the task checklist or on the store summary page. So as we're reviewing each store as a whole, we could see if we're getting delayed, and if so, how far from the date that we originally targeted.
Got it. I see what you mean. I don't think there's a way to do it. It's a great idea, and I'm going to take it back to my development staff. So what we're seeing is the need for a tabular thing where we can look at our milestones and sort of fool with them as they go.
Correct.
Cool. Thank you, ma'am. Brian, you had a question that was about, you have one checklist that you're currently using. Is there an easy way to break a checklist into secondary checklists? And sadly, no, there is not an easy way to break things into. I can't move tasks between checklists, unfortunately. We're looking to update our opening checklist and start taking advantage of a variety of dependencies that are now available. What's the best strategy to tackle this project? Do we build a new checklist or do we modify an existing one? And what will be the impact on current locations in Opener? Okay, so you can choose to do it either way. You can choose to build a new checklist or you can choose to modify the existing one. I would say that if the tasks are not going to change, that what I would do is choose to open my task and just change the tasks because there's no point in re-entering them. So let's say this is my task checklist. And what I really want to do is change all of these. Like right now, they're all set to be based on opening date, and I want to change them. What I would do is I would choose them all, and then I would choose to modify them all so I can see my whole checklist. So here they all are, and now I can change their dependencies all at one time. So they might all be dependent on expected opening date. Instead, I'm just going to come in here and change the dependencies. That's probably what I would do. If I knew that I had, like I wanted to open up in a batch because this is confusing to look at, then a possibility might be instead of opening them all up, I might come into the task checklist and say, yeah, I want these 25 or however many there are, and just open these guys up and change their dependency. Because now all of these guys get the same dependency change, and then I go out and change the other dependency and go out and change the other dependency and so on. So if I already had the tasks and I was just changing dependencies, I'd probably do it this way. If I didn't have all the tasks and I was going to totally revamp the list, I might find it easier to just start over with another list. One thing about that, because of the primary checklist thing, you don't necessarily have to kill this task checklist. You can just open another secondary checklist and make a new secondary checklist and then use it as the checklist that is the one you use, and just every time you do it, choose the new one, make it the primary checklist. It'll appear on the main tab. So you don't have to dismantle the big task checklist. You can just abandon it for another one. So I'm not sure that we answered all the questions in there, so let's take a look. Best strategy for that, do I need to build a new checklist? We did that. What will be the impact on current locations in the opener? So if I come in here and I change something, it's going to say, do you want to change this for future folks going forward? Just change one day. It'll ask me, do I want to apply the changes to only future locations, in which case everybody who came before was under those rules, and I can have all my new people use my new rules. I can say, nope, change everybody that's currently in the process, because now everyone has to do this. Or I can say, apply it to everybody new and these 5 stores that are on the new program. So I can control very closely what the effect will be on my existing locations. So hopefully I've got that one. Malvina, if I missed anything, please go ahead and chat again. Allie, can you change the view on the store summary to be automatically saved so it's sorted by expected opening date? No, you cannot. You can come in and click it every time, but there's no saving of the sort order, unfortunately. Kitty, I'd like to invite a franchisor or candidate to opener for resale. Provide a resale checklist. So when the deal closes, I was to move the data to the store without changing the store number. That's true, you cannot duplicate a franchise ID. So Kitty, again, I'm going to ask you to just elaborate a little bit on why would you just not invite them to the real store number? Oh, it's a resale, so you're trying to move it back from Info Manager, I see. Go ahead, Kitty, if you can elaborate just a little bit, maybe we can reproduce that.
Yes, we do a large number of resales, so it's difficult when the store is open and operating and all the data is under the store number to provide a checklist and use the opener to a potential buyer. So
got it. I see what you mean.
So I need to put the store number in opener, put the new owner's information in, and begin to take notes, give them a resale checklist, and then when they actually close the deal, then I can transfer the store into the new owner's name and do the transfer, but that resale checklist and that data can merge into the store. But I don't know what store ID I'd set up in opener, so I don't know that I can use opener for resales.
Got it, right. And you can't just open the existing store because you can't add a new checklist onto it for resale.
Right.
I'm with you.
So I'm trying to figure out a way to put a resale candidate through the startup checklist in opener without changing the store number.
Got it. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I bet there's a way to do it, and I'm going to have to noodle with it. I bet you guys have been noodling with it longer than I have, of course. So let me take that one and see if I can get back to you. I'm writing it down to make sure that I've got it. The resale checklist for sale. Yeah, and the sites tab doesn't really give you a checklist per se. Awesome question. Let me find out. I'm sorry I don't have an immediate answer for you, but let me see what we can come up with.
Yeah, because I'd like to send them an opener link and let them go on and do the same thing that a real franchise partner does when they're doing the startup. And then when it really does, then they're franchise partners, and then I move them from, opener into the same system, but it just adds to the existing store, and now the new data's in there. And all the notes purge.
Because you want to keep the sales history. Yep, let me have a little confab, and I'll get back with you privately, and then we'll talk about it in the next one as well.
All
so
right,
for those of you who are also interested in that answer, we'll give that answer in the next Ask the Experts as well. Thank you. That's a really cool question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Allie. Can you receive an email notification for an update or a change in project status? Not an opener. So Ryan, I'm sorry, I was in the middle of talking and I don't know what it is you asked, if there are plans to change. So I'll let you retype that and I'll answer that. Liz is on the call. Yay, Liz. And she says she thinks that you possibly can. Good, thanks, Amy. I will make sure that we get you that answer too. Can you send email reminders of overdue tasks? Boy, can you. Yes, so let me talk to you a little bit about what the reminders are, because there's a bunch of them. Are there plans to change view options in the store list? I am unaware of specific plans to change view options, but now that we have a bunch of good suggestions from you and a spec for a tabular view, it's possible that we could add a report in, because one of the nice things about reports in Opener is they're not quite, they don't look quite like reports in the other modules. They're more interactive. And so it's possible that what we can do to solve that is to add something on that's more like a report. All right, so email reminders of overdue tasks. I don't see a calendar dependency as an option in the drop-down listing. Right, so Christian, this one baffled me for quite some time. Here's the thing, we can only do a calendar option for something that's already underway, that's at a store, right? So we've already got some dates happening and so on, and so when I come in here and look to make a dependency, I can make a calendar dependency on this because we have some idea what the dates are. I can't do it into a template like from the admin panel because that doesn't actually make sense, right? I'm making this template so it's going to live forever. I can't put the date April 13th, 2017 in there because time marches on, right? So to put it in a template would be wrong. So I can put it in an individual store thing because that makes sense. We're already sort of swimming around in the time stream and I'm doing it for an individual location, but it doesn't make sense to do a calendar option for a template, and that's why it doesn't appear there. And for a long time, I wasn't paying attention to where I was focused, and I didn't understand why it kept disappearing. Okay, email reminders. Here is the interesting thing about reminders. When we look at a task, let's go to add more. We have these opportunities for reminders. Your task owner is going to get a reminder on the start date and on the completion date. Just automatically, those are the ones we can't even suppress. That's going to happen no matter what. You have the opportunity also to remind them some number of days prior to the start date. So let's say that this is supposed to happen April 1st. They're going to get a message on April 1st that says today's the start date for this. If you say 7 days prior to this, then March 24th, they're going to get a reminder that says, hey, in a week, you're going to have to order a truck. Then they're going to get another thing that says, today's the day. You can also send them a thing that says, let's say this is a 2-week task. You can send them another thing that 3 days prior to the scheduled completion date says, in 3 days, you're going to, this completion date on this is due. So you can set 2 are going to happen no matter what. You can set a 3rd one and a 4th one right here for to warn them that those start dates and completion dates are going to be up. You can also give them an overdue reminder if you want to. So if I come into the admin panel in Opener, there's a thing called overdue alert frequency. So for all the tasks in the system, I can say any task that's 5 days overdue, fire another one that says, hey, this task is 5 days overdue, just so you know. If that were not enough alerts for you, you can also choose to send additional alerts for one based on criticality. So you can say for a really critical thing, send another email that says, hey, this thing is overdue, and it doesn't have to be sent to that. It doesn't have to be sent to the owner. It can actually be sent to escalate to maybe the project owner or a backup person, secondary person. And you can do that here, where you're going to, you can put triggers in to say, for critical tasks, if it's 2 days overdue, send it to both the owner and to the project owner or to that owner's backup. If for non-critical things, we're going to wait to 3 days. There's another third thing called the system item. So depending on how you mark the task, you can have up to 3 different things that have those things that fire. Now I can also say send one at 2 days overdue and also send one at 4 days overdue. You can say, here we go, this particular task, it'll put the task in there and say this task was due to be completed before, and I can say, well, I can CC somebody else in there and I can save. So for a critical item, for a critical item, I can set as many as I want. So I can set 2, 4, 6, 8 days. I can send as many overdue alerts as I want. So I'm going to get an alert for the beginning and the end. Inside the task, I can say send a reminder before the beginning and before the end if I want. I can also send an overdue reminder at an interval for every task, 5 days. And then I can set additional escalation alerts at any number of intervals that I define. So there's a lot of ways I can get reminders from them. I think we're through all the questions that have piled up. If I missed your question, let me know. Okay. So those are just a few things that you can do to simplify how people see checklists or arrange checklists in a way that's easier to look at. Talking about tabs there, we talked a little bit about alerts. Any other questions anybody has about Opener or anything else? I'll do my best. I'll wait a sec so people can chat. All right, great. Thank you, Charmaine. Guys, so thanks so much for your time. If you think of something else, please let me know. I'm going to take your tabular view suggestion back with me. Kitty, I'm going to talk to some folks about the resale checklist. I think that Liz was telling me she thinks she knows the way it can be done, so I'm hopeful on that one. We'll let everybody know what the outcome of that one was, and we'll make sure that you guys get copies of the slides and the Opener quick checklist. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great weekend.